Mr. Mayor, you asked me last time to talk to Mr. Crankshaw, the consultant for overlay districts. I was able to do that. We talked at length about overlays, and he still does that process and would be willing to help us out. We probably talked for maybe 30 minutes on the phone, and he had the opportunity to get on his computer and look at the area that we're talking about in particular. And his first question was to me, what characteristic are we trying to preserve? I mean, are we going after historical, cultural, architectural, or riverfront? I said, well, of course not riverfront. But anyway, after that, we talked a little more, and basically we went back and recollected on what we did for Chestnut Street and North Broadway. Chestnut Street cost us approximately $3,500 to do, and then North Broadway was about $8,000, his services. He thought that this would be probably in line if you did that only with Chestnut Street. That's just a ballpark at this time. He doesn't know how involved it may become because it could involve 1, 5, 6. It could involve numerous meetings. He don't know at this point. But then he asked me a question that I had asked you earlier, and I did not prod him for this. He just asked the question. He said, what you probably would be better doing is just inviting the whole neighborhood to come and let me explain to them what overlays does and just see what the interest is. See if there's an interest in the neighborhood. And if not, then you can always go back to the smaller section. But he says this seems to be a neighborhood. It extends much farther. You've got the rest of Center Street. You've got you got Forest. You got Jackson. And he said, I know that that's been discussed before. And I told him, yes, in the past that has been discussed. And he said, well, if you're willing to do that, he said, I'd be willing to come down and you could set the meeting up and I'd be willing to share it. And it may not go any farther than that. Maybe there's not an interest, but if there is, then we can decide if we want to move forward from that point or we can fall back, whatever you want to do. So with that, that's the research I found from Mr. Crankshaw. And that's if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those.
Questions or comments from the council?
I think there's some people in the audience. May they ask questions of Mr. Van Winkle also?
Well, we can let them ask questions, but do we have any from the council first? Mr. Burnside?
Did he talk any more about if we broaden the scope of the work, what that would cost? Or
he probably said more on the scale of the North Broadway, 8 to 10. No, he said no more than 10 probably less than 10. But he said that's just taking it from what he can see. He's got aerial photography, and he's able to look at it three-dimensionally on his computer to kind of what's in that area. So he kind of looked at the whole area, too, not only the East Center Street area.
So if he comes in and there's not a lot of interest for the larger scope of the project, but more we fall back to the community that's requesting it.
That's the council.
Yeah. That changes, yeah.
I think that's the call of the council because you're the one that's going to be funding it. You could either, if there is a large interest, then we would bring that report back to this council, and then you can make a decision whether you want us to proceed that way, or if there's not a large interest, whether you want us to proceed with just the area that we're talking about here. We would not proceed without permission from the council.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Any citizen like to comment about the report?
Okay, I represent the East End of Center Street Association, and we would welcome any others who want to join into the overlay district, but we will also welcome whatever the, outcome is. We just want to be considered at this point.
Other comments? Yes, ma'am.
It was my understanding at the last meeting of the council that the city staff was going to do some outreach into other neighborhoods near ours. Was that a correct understanding?
Well, apparently the city staff contacted the expert and found out where he was, and the outreach would be setting up a meeting, and the question would be, Should it be a large general meeting, possibly at the the municipal building or the some other convenient area, or to just focus on the end of Center Street neighborhood?
I guess the only other thing I would add at this point is in discussing the design district overlay and in looking at the Chestnut Street design district overlay, it seemed to us that we could wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel, that we could use a lot of this Chestnut Street work as a template. Ours would not be identical, but it would probably be fairly similar.
That makes sense, yeah. Other comments? Dr. Payne, come to one of the microphones, please.
I don't live at the end of Center Street, but I'm representing my daughter who does. And is it, Mr. Benway, is it determined what could be, say if a part of Center Street was interested, but say Jackson Street was not, or something, is it defined what would have to be included to make it bigger? You see what I mean? Say maybe not just the east end of Center Street, but a block on Center Street really was into it, but maybe not Forest Street. I don't know. Is that feasible? You want to get the most bang for your buck, but you're not going to get the whole town. I mean, I don't know how it works.
My understanding is that what you do is, first of all, you define an area.
Well,
and what you would do is look at the interest involved and see if there's a. Now, you want that area to be contiguous. You would not
sure.
jump from one end to the other. Yeah. But you try to define an area based on the input of the group that's there. Somebody said last week there were 17 homes, I think, on Chestnut Street, and there's 10 involved in this. I believe that's correct. So we're relatively close to where we were on the Chestnut Street.
I was just thinking you might take Center Street down to Forest Street and include the top part of Harrison Road there, and you'd have about the same size.
That's true.
You could try to, I don't know if the East Berea or the Berea Ridge Improvement Association, whatever is still.
East Ridge.
Is that still?
East Ridge Association, yeah.
Does still exists?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been asked for dues recently. But, okay, I just wondered, it is feasible to try to contact, a smaller, expand a little bit and then whatever. So that seems reasonable.
I'm here for the wishes of the mayor and the council if they so wish me to just look at the one area, if they want to expand it further. I'm just throwing out there the options that we have.
You can leave your dues here, John.
I made this comment last time when this was talked about. Historically, Center and Jackson and Forest Streets are older part of Berea.
We consider them a neighborhood, yes.
Right, and it just seems to me you ought to look at all that to start with for a meeting. If there's not interest, then you shrink down. But, when you pass Popolino's and you head down Center Street, or you head out of Boone Tavern, you go down Jackson, those are 2 or 3 areas that are sort of
that was our thought.
Connected almost with the college, and an extension of it as things developed and unfolded. It seems that you ought to try that. If it has to then shrink down to smaller, then it ought to. I think that's how I feel about it.
Wouldn't it be possible just to have a public meeting and invite whoever wants to come?
That's what we would do. What we would probably do is put together a letter and just walk door to door and put it on the door and just invite people to come and we'll share with them what is being proposed. And if there's not enough interest from the whole neighborhood, we'll scale it back.
Probably ought to enlist the services of the East Ridge neighborhood as well. They probably have a lot of contacts.
Yes.
And could spread that word. Well, then is it the sense of the council that you'd like Mr. Van Winkle to work with Ned Crankshaw and set up a neighborhood meeting with the idea of providing information and also trying to define what portion of the neighborhood is interested, if any, in if it's limited to the end of Center Street or if it is a larger area?
Yes.
And then report back after.
I'll be glad to do that.
That's a good plan of action.
That'll probably take about